Hello, my name is Alexis Bloodsworth, and I'm a second-year law student at Penn State Law. I'm currently in the Manglona Lab for Gender and Economic Equity. For the lab's Witnesses to Herstory project, we are capturing the personal experiences of women during a transformative time in the United States. Today, I have the privilege of welcoming Shannon Lutmer, who's agreed to share her story as part of our project. She is an amazing mother, grandmother, and former nurse and teacher. Thank you, Ms. Lutmer, for joining me today. I'm looking forward to speaking with you.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here.
Thank you. So we'll go ahead and just start with your childhood. So I know that you were born in 1951. Can you tell me where you were born?
Yes, I was born at Memorial Hospital, no, excuse me, St. Mary's Hospital in Long Beach, California. I was the fifth child to my mom and dad, and they had moved out from North Dakota, and my mom was pregnant with me, and they came out and had me in a brand new area.
So your siblings, how many brothers did you have and how many sisters did you have?
I have five brothers and two sisters. I have one sister, that would be the third sister, that she passed just before I was born. And so, but that's how many, there were four after me. In fact, I was given the title of I was the oldest of the five little ones because I was the fifth one born, but the fourth child.
And did all of your siblings live in the home with you? Like, what was the age gap between you guys for the most part?
Most part, it was every 2 years.
Did both of your parents work outside of the home?
My mother did not work outside of the home until I was in high school, I believe. Actually, no, that was not right. She didn't start working until after I got married. And she met my mother-in-law, and my mother-in-law was the one that got her interested in going back to school and getting a part-time job.
What did your
And
dad do for work?
my dad, they ran a grocery store in North Dakota. And then he realized they weren't going to make any more money than what they already had. And he had maximized that. So they moved out to California with a promise of school and a job in aeronautical engineering. And so that's what he became, was an aeronautical engineer in Southern California.
Do you know if any of his colleagues were women?
Very few. In fact, my sister worked there, and but she was only like a computer analysis, or did the computations, I should say. And I told him at one time when I was a sophomore in high school, I was so excited because we went and took a tour of the plant that he was testing the thrust complexes of the Saturn V in Alabama. And I told him, I said, Dad, I want to be an engineer. He said, don't bother. They're only given routine work and they just don't, they're not given engineering. So that's what I took him at his word and never thought about it again. And I don't think I would have if I realized how much math was involved. But yeah, I was told that he said, no, the engineers are not there.
You mean he was talking
The,
about
the, yeah,
engineers?
the women engineers were, it was not something that he had ever seen in the space, at least in the space engineering.
How did you feel when he told you that?
Um, I thought, well, it sounded kind of limiting. Um, and then, of course, like when my sister went to work and then she told me that that's what she would, I thought, he's right. And I don't think very deeply sometimes. And so it didn't bother me as much because I did by that time know how much math was involved. If I had loved math, then I probably would have been more disappointed. But I found out that it wasn't probably for me. But it wasn't, the glass ceiling hadn't been broken at all. So that was something that was just understood. Okay, that, I mean, it was just the way it was because women basically were at home.
Did your sister work there while she was in high school or after high school?
After high school. Yeah, because she did like math and she did end up being a comptroller and she did make good money and she went on and her life was not her kids. And so she definitely had a different personality than I did. And she pursued it, not in engineering, but where she knew that she could make a difference on her own.
So when your mom went back to school, you said she went back to school, right? What year was that?
Um, it was probably in, let me think, probably 72, 71, something like that, 1971, 72. And she just went back to continuing education classes at the community college to do bookkeeping. Bookkeeping and obviously different kinds of math classes like that were the ones that the women got.
Could you just explain what bookkeeping is?
Yes, it's a matter of taking people's information, putting them in the ledger and making sure that everything that's brought in matches what's taken out, or so that they're keeping the books correct in mathematically. And she used, I know that she learned how to use the machine of the calculator or the adder or whatever that was, that it, not like the technology like we're used to here, but where you really had to push it in and then crank it and push it in and crank it. So that's what she learned how to do and learned to do it well.
So how were the household responsibilities split up between your parents when you were a kid?
My dad went and earned the living, and my mom took care of the house. He would make sure that one of the boys was doing the lawns. The boys did the outside stuff, and the girls did the inside. Now, I know that, and as we got older, we were given more responsibilities because having a family of 8 kids and 2 parents, it took a lot of people to do everything. Um, and we did not have microwaves. We didn't have a dishwasher. We did have a washer, no dryer for the clothes. And so doing laundry and everything, the tea towels that you used to have, like Monday is wash day, Tuesday is iron. I don't know if you're even familiar with, okay, dish towels that had certain chores, they would be assigned to certain days of the week. That's why, because people had to do it that way.
So did the boys ever do any inside chores or was it just strictly outside?
Um, they would they would do inside, when my dad would take my mom, because my mom didn't drive until I was at least a sophomore in high school. So my dad, when he would take her to go grocery shopping on Saturdays, our job was to get the house cleaned. And so everybody did have to vacuum or dust mop their floors, and dust. And then the boys did that too. But during the week, there wasn't as much. They did have to take their turns doing dishes though, too.
Do you remember if your parents had any specific expectations of you and your sisters because you were girls that were different from the expectations that they had of the boys?
No, yeah, I don't think they really did. My my mom and dad had very traditional roles, but they didn't. Mostly, it was different expectations based on how well you did in school and how much you liked it. So yeah, my sister was going to go on to college, and my parents didn't sign up. They wouldn't fill out the FAFSA for me because I wanted to go up to Berkeley, but they had every expectation that I would go to school. They just weren't paying for it. And of course, in California, it was less expensive. And and now Patty, my younger sister, she didn't do as well in school. She did well, but just never was, she didn't like it very much. She did well enough, but didn't like it very much. And they never said anything to her about going on to college. And then they never said anything to my brother Larry about going on to college. Both of them could have made it through there just no problem, but they just didn't think that was their interest.
What did
So
they
that was the only thing that I saw that was different. And I was kind of mad because I thought my brothers and my sister, we're all above average in intelligence and they could have all gone. but my sister and my brother have done very well, and they've never missed it. So I can only be, maybe that was good on their part.
So, talking about school, let's go ahead and just talk about your school. We'll start with
Okay.
elementary grade school. So, you started in 1956, and you went to a public school until you were in third grade, correct?
Correct. Yes. And
Okay.
then I went to a Catholic school,
And
and
what
that was, go ahead.
was there a dress code when you were at the public school?
Oh, yes, it was wonderful because you just didn't have to think about what you were going to wear. We had a brown and white check skirts and Peter Pan collar white shirts because we were in California, so we didn't. And you could have a sweater um, that would either brown or white sweater, and that's what we wore. The boys wore the corduroy pants, brown, and then with the white, just regular closet shirt, kind of button down. That's what we call the button down shirts, with closet shirts, because those were kept in the closet as opposed to t-shirts. But that's yeah. So we had a dress code, and the ones that had the extra money were wearing the extra fancy socks, the white fancy socks, or the fancy hair bows and things like that. But yeah, the dress code to me was just so nice.
Were you able to play like at school while wearing the skirt that didn't
Oh,
pose any?
yes. Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Um, Foursquare, tetherball. Yeah. Anything. Yeah, we could. We just did. We didn't think anything of it because they were long. I mean, they were below the knee.
Were your teachers mostly male or female?
Mostly female because we had mostly nuns, sisters of St. Joseph. And but my third grade teacher was the most amazing person, Miss Clevier. And she wore blue outfits with blue matching shoes. I'd never seen a woman dressed like that before. And she would wear high heels because my mother didn't wear high heels and she didn't wear everything all matching. And then she would wear purple and then she'd wear pink. It was just amazing um, what she would wear. And she she liked me, and I did like to please people. So she gave me a very special book that I'll never forget. It was called The Book of Joy, and it was an anthology of poems and stories and just wonderful things that she just gave me that book, and I kept it for years and years. Unfortunately, I don't have it now, but that was pretty amazing. That because in being in a big family, to be singled out was kind of important. But anyway, so yeah, most of them were. In fact, I don't know that there was a man teacher because most of them were like I said, nuns.
And that was in the public school?
No, no, no. That was when after third grade when we went to the Catholic school.
Okay.
Public school, there were some men teachers in like the fifth grade or sixth grade unit, and there were also when I would go skating, I could see the teachers coming out of the junior high public school, and there were men there too. Yes.
So when you were at the Catholic school, was the dress code different from when you were at the public school?
Oh, I'm sorry. That's when we went to the public school. It was you could wear whatever you wanted, and
Okay.
then the dress code was at the Catholic school. My
Okay.
apologies.
Okay.
Started high school in the fall of '65.
And so you went to the Catholic high school yeah, the Catholic high school, with just one semester of your sophomore year you spent in Alabama, correct?
Correct. Yes.
And so what year it would have been 1966 when you went to Alabama?
Yes.
Okay. Um, and why did your family go to Alabama for just that short semester?
Because my dad was he was asked to go and lead up the testing for the thrust complex, the second stage of the Saturn V rocket. And so that because his job was making sure that the pogo that comes from those thrustings when it shakes the rocket, they called it pogo, is when it interrupted the fuel lines. So he had to figure out a way of how to test it to make sure that the fuel line stayed open enough and generated the fuel in a steady motion as opposed to being interrupted. And so that's why we were there. And it was a very lovely, lovely time.
Was
It
it
was
a
the most rural we ever lived as kids.
was it a public school that you went to while you were there?
Yes, yes, it was. And one of the first things I was asked is if I was surprised that they had Black kids in the schools. And I said, no, I wasn't, because we had them in the Catholic school. I mean, I never thought anything about it. They were just kids. And they said, well, it just started. Now you could tell that there was some animosity, that they didn't care for it. But and there were male and female teachers there. And they did have prayer in school. Usually not at the beginning, but they would have it at the flagpole. You could go and meet at the flagpole and have a morning prayer before you would start your classes.
And so you said that you could tell that there was some animosity about the school being desegregated. Can you give an
Yeah.
example?
No, just the way that people talked, and you never saw anybody. I was only invited to 2 different little get-togethers, but there was never somebody of color in our groups. We did have one opportunity to travel because one of my dad's friends at work, he got sick, and so there was a woman that cared for him, and in his recovery he couldn't go back to work yet, but they would take these little outings and he would bring us with him. And so we had the 2 of those adults taking us to different battlefields and stuff like that. And that's where we learned about sorghum and cane, where the donkeys go around and they absolutely crush the cane in order to get the syrup and make sorghum. I had not heard of those things before. So, like I
What
said,
is
this
sorghum?
sorghum is a very thick, syrupy fluid from the cane sugar. And so could be like molasses. I mean, it's sort of like that. And so, but so that was interesting. And we saw bales of cotton out on so I mean, it was things that I read about in school books, I was seeing. So that was different.
Were there any sex ed classes in the high school in Alabama?
Nope. None in my California one either.
Did you like it in Alabama?
I did, but I wanted to go back to where I was more comfortable and where it wasn't as cold. And because California is pretty temperate, and I missed my friends, because even though I was included, I still was very much an outsider, just because that's the way you go when you move into places that are new. And so, and I think maybe the South is a little bit more that way because California seems to be eclectic in the way they gather people. There's a lot of different people in California, but the South seemed to have their families and their situations pretty much, because that's even as we grew older, I found that with other people too.
So going back to your experience in high school in California,
Mhm.
your school was split up between men and women, correct?
Yes, yes.
And how did you or your friends feel about being split up from the boys like that?
I loved it. I loved it because it was such a freedom. You didn't have to worry about what you were doing or how silly you would be because you weren't impressing anybody. You were just being who you were. And it was just wonderful. I don't know how the guys felt about it, but I loved it. And I'm sure there was girls that, you know, would have rather had the boys in the classrooms, but it just let me be me. And I liked that. And then you knew that in all the classes you were taking, whether it was history or math or languages, that nobody was being favored, between boys and girls. Um, and I don't know that I noticed that as much. I've thought about it more since then than I did at the time. But you just got to be as smart as you wanted to be and work as hard as you wanted to be. And nobody was calling you names or thinking that you were, don't be too smart, Shannon. Because some people would tell me that, and you're acting too smart, Shannon. And, in junior high, and you just go, I'm just being me. I didn't. So when we went to high school, it was all fun. I mean, I just loved it.
Who would tell you that when you were in middle school? Who would tell you that?
Other girls, they would just say, you're not going to attract any boys if you're going to be so smart. And you just go, okay, that doesn't make sense to me. I didn't think it was that important.
So, were there any classes that that were offered to the boys but not to you, or vice versa?
I never went on the track. No, I don't think so. Because I was offered to take 5 years of math in 4. And I said, give it to somebody else. Now, my dad was very upset about that because he just thought, you can do it, so do it. And I said, I don't want to. I would rather do language and art. And I was not that oriented to math. And so I know that sometimes they had the same classes. In senior year, they did bring some of the guys and the girls together in some of the classes. And I think physics was one of them. But I never saw anything that was offered to guys. I don't even think they had shop in that school. And I don't know that they had art, which would have been a shame, but we did. And I loved it. But
Did you take home economics?
no, they did not offer home economics. We had limited. Sister Luke was our art teacher, and that was her niche. And so she also produced art for the convent. They would do posters. They were very active in social justice and things like that, and being positive and trying to spread good news and stuff. And so she would do silkscreen and do posters and stuff. So we had that built in. And now I know when we've gone back for a reunion, they do have the boys and the girls together in all the school. And the guys are in the art field as much as what the girls are. So that's a good thing.
So you said that there was no kind of sex ed curriculum at your school. Okay. So how did you learn about like menstruation, or where did you learn what period products to buy?
My mother, she said, one of these days you're going to feel something and it's going to be this, and don't worry about it. You're okay. And then she explained it, but it was so weird. My mom would tell my dad to go and get something. I go, don't tell dad. Because I don't know what I was thinking. Like I said, I just didn't think that guys even knew about it, you know. And so yeah, everything was at home.
Was that a topic that you and your friends ever talked about?
No, no, I didn't. I didn't. And I think other girls might have, but I don't think I did. One time somebody did it kind of an off color kind of joke. And I was so embarrassed by it that I think that they understood that and just didn't ever do that anymore, and didn't ever talk about those kinds of things. Those were friends that were on my block, but usually we had other things that we were talking about, and things that were important to us and stuff.
What kinds of things did you guys talk about that were important to you?
Um, well, I mean, it was, I just, we cared about school, we cared about our grades and what we were doing, but then we also had events at the school, whether it was a football game or what it was this or that. And then we had Mary's Day, which was a big event for the whole year, that everything was planned for this Mary's Day, that we would honor the Blessed Virgin Mary. And, and also I belonged to the Social Action Corps or to the Spanish club or the drama club, and we always had things that we were doing. So those are the things that just occupied a lot of busy stuff. I mean, just, and then again, I didn't ever mind being by myself to and from on the bus routes. Because when we went to high school, it was two different bus rides because you had to do a transfer. Unless you walked a half a mile down to the downtown, and then you could get it in one bus. But so those are the things. I mean, mostly things that were happening, the events and stuff. Sometimes we would talk about our parents because sometimes they were helpful and sometimes they weren't. And so we needed somebody to listen. So those are things that we did.
Did you guys ever talk about like anything that was going on in the community or like socially, social movements, things like that?
Not not very many social movements, other than the fact that we did do, baskets for the poor. That was part of our social action group. And we did read to the blind, and we would try to find out if kids needed things. We did go down to Tijuana a couple times to help the orphans that were there. So we did those kinds of things. I know that we were excited about Robert F. Kennedy coming to take his brother's place. I had a friend who happened to be Black. Her name was Leah Williams, and she was just so excited about this. And then that was probably one of the first times when he was shot and killed that I realized how devastating that would be for somebody of her color, because they were counting on him, and the ability to say that we need to have these people share in the whole community. That's what, I never had, I didn't see it that way because I just accepted everybody as they were. So I didn't know until she shared how hard that would be for her community, that I never even thought about it, that I just didn't see that way. I was very colorblind. I don't know if I can share with you, there was a Hispanic family on our block. I never thought of them as a Hispanic family. They were just the Peraltas. And it was when my mom was ill and dying that Mrs. Peralta wrote a letter, because for whatever reason, my mother decided she wasn't going to see anybody anymore after she was given a terminal diagnosis. But her friend wrote to her about how important it was to her that my mother accepted her in with all the other ladies on the block, because she says, I never would have fit in if you had not facilitated that. See, and those were things that I just didn't even know at the time that was something going on. But anyway, so I don't know, maybe I should be more, I am thankful that my mom and dad did not raise me to have prejudicial thoughts because of color. And so that's something that I just didn't have. And so other than keeping busy with school and doing the good things that we could do within our own group, I wasn't, not then. More Vietnam was going on. And so that became more, we were more attuned to that once we went to college.
So I know you talked a little bit about some of the extracurriculars that you did, like social action corps, Spanish club. What else did you do?
The drama club, and then the French. And Social Action Corps was very busy. I mean, that was when we were doing a lot of stuff. And I got on student council when I was president of the Social Action Corps. But I mean, I even did pep club. You just kept busy. You just did stuff. Sometimes it was just nice to have all these people that were your peers as opposed to going home and knowing what you had to do when you got home. Sometimes you just stayed away.
Did you play any sports in high school?
No, no, I was not athletic. I would have loved to have been because I do like sports, but that was never my gift. And we only had to take PE freshman year. The rest of the athletes, they continued to take it and work on their skills and everything as they went through the years. But I was not ever athletic. I took it up much later in life. So.
Do you know if the activities that you did for PE when you were a freshman, were they the same for both boys and girls, the activities that you would do?
I have no idea. I don't know what the boys did because we were never in the gym at the same time, that's for sure. Except for dances.
But did you know, do you remember if the sports that were offered to boys and girls were the same at the high school?
Well, you wouldn't have football. Girls wouldn't have football. And basically there was basketball and football. And I think there might have been volleyball. I'm not sure if they played it as a team sport. I don't think. I think we only had basketball and football. Oh, and cross country, because they could run anywhere. Because that's all we had was a gym. We didn't have any outdoor track or anything. So, but I know that they had cross country, and no, the girls did not do cross country and they did not do football. So basketball was basically the only one that I know that they did.
Did any of your friends want to do cross country?
No, 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 nobody ever talked about it. It was just, no.
And did any of your siblings play sports while you were in high school? Any of the ones that were in the high school at the same time as you?
Oh, none of my siblings were, well, Keith was 2 years he did cross country. That's how I remember that there was cross country, because I never went to one of his matches. I'm sure my mom and dad never went to one of his, because it's hard when they're cross country.
Did you have performances or anything for the drama club that you would do?
Yes, we competed, and I would do either dramatic interp or comic interpretation. I remember doing And to think that I saw it on Mulberry Street by Dr. Seuss. I did that all by memory, and I would compete and see and try to act it out just in as a soliloquy. And we did. I know that we did some things with the Spanish club too. I know we went to St. Mary's and we did a competition there, and they thought that I was from northern Spain because I had a very good accent. They didn't understand why I could speak so well and have blue eyes and blonde hair. And I said, because I can mimic an accent pretty well. That's why, because I still don't do Spanish very well at all, even after 4 years.
Did your parents come to watch your performances and stuff?
No, they did not. They just, they were busy and going downtown, because it was, like I said, 14, 15 miles away, that they didn't want to go. And it wasn't their interest. And so, and they did have the younger kids at home. And if they were playing ball games and stuff like that, that's where they wanted to be. They would much rather go to a ball game.
Did you like to read when you were in high school?
Reading has always been a challenge for me. I'm not dyslexic or anything. I'm just a slow reader. And so I did not read as much as what I think is a good thing to do. I always promote it with all my grandkids, much more than I ever did myself. But I mean, I would always keep up with the work that I had to do for school, and that was a lot. But I also did the well, I would read something that somebody would show me, an article or something. But mostly, I remember having to read Don Quixote by Cervantes. That was the longest thing I ever read. And I tried to take notos because I was supposed to have a report in the next day, and I was trying to read the rest of it. And because I'm so slow, and I had gotten a package of notos, and my mother saw it, and she just reamed me out. She said,
Is
"If you
that
can't,"
like an energy?
yes, it was. It had caffeine in it, so and that's what it was called, no dose, like don't dose. And she just said, if you can't do it on your own, then you just don't do it. You should have figured that out. And so I did. I paid for that, and she threw it away. But I got through it. But no, I didn't read as much as what I could have or should have. In fact, I remember junior high book I should have read when I was in fourth and fifth grade, just because I missed those good stories that were then, like Katie Woodlawn and things like that, that I knew was way below my actual grade level, but I liked the stories. And so I would read. And I still am not a very fast reader. So, but I don't mind it as much as just where I am.
So for your school readings that you were assigned, do you remember if you were ever assigned any books that were written by women or about women?
No, other than the saints. We would read about the saints. And but that usually not a whole book. That again would be an article or a handout or something. But they were women that did amazing things. Um, but no, not really. I'm trying to think. Not very much. Now, I bet you Vera Bodensteiner and Robin Crotty probably did read those things, but I was not in that group. They were much more outwardly aware than I was.
And what opportunities did you see for women while you were in high school? Like, what did you see portrayed on TV, in ads, in the community?
I think that I noticed, mostly I looked at that, teaching, nursing, um, even doctors. I thought that's a possibility. Um, and academia, higher levels of teaching. Counselors. I thought, psychologists. I thought that there were a lot of possibilities. I wanted to be an international interpreter. And I didn't see any problem with that until I figured out that I just really don't have an aptitude for languages. But as far as being a woman and doing something like that, I didn't think that would be any problem. Um, there weren't, I never thought anything of political. That wasn't on the docket. I yeah, I could be most anything that I thought I wanted to, but it was definitely limited into what I did see. And you rarely saw um, women even being a doctor or a pilot or things like that. I mean, because I thought flying must be nice because my dad loved flying. He was a pilot. And I thought that would be nice, but you just didn't see them. And so you saw the stewardesses. They didn't even call them stewards. They called them stewardesses because they were all female. So, but those are things. Of course, there were a lot of time in high school that I wanted to be a nun too. And that was only going to be for females.
So when you were in high school, for how long did you want to be a nun? Do you remember how many years?
Yes, until I was a senior.
Okay. And then after that, did you have any idea about what you wanted to do after that?
I wanted to marry your papa. I should say. I wanted to marry the guy I went out with in high school senior year. I knew that that would be something that would be great. So,
Did you have a job while you were in high school?
no, no. There was no time. We left at like 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't get home until almost 7 o'clock at night, and everything was on the bus. And we didn't have access to cars or things like that for jobs. So no, I never had one. I had them in the summertime, but that would be babysitting until I graduated. And then I got a job as a waitress at a WT grant at the mall, and I could take the bus. You had to walk almost a mile to get to the bus stop, but it would take you the rest of the way.
So you did babysitting during the summers, you said.
Mhm.
Okay. And how much were you normally paid for those babysitting jobs?
One of them was that I worked 40 hours a week and I got $25 for the week. And so, and that was with me taking care of 3 children and all the housework, the laundry, the ironing, the dishes from the night before, plus feeding the kids and having everything cleaned up for when she came home. So that was summertime. My dad would drop me off at 6:30 in the morning on his way to work and then pick me up at 5:30 on his way home. So it was a little bit more than 40 hours.
So
And then the other one, I got 50 cents an hour. And I only had 2 boys to watch, and that was on our block. So it was really only 40 hours. And she didn't expect me to do any of the laundry or the housekeeping and stuff. So that was kind of fun.
did you know any boys that were ever doing babysitting at all?
No, no, no. They did lawn work. I never saw any girls going out and doing lawn work either and getting paid.
So you met your husband while you were in high school.
Yes.
And what year was that you guys met?
We met in my junior year, which was 1968. And I asked him to the backwards dance, which is Sadie Hawkins, as some people called it. And he told me no. And so then I waited a whole year and then asked him again. By that time, he had been coached to say yes. And so he did. And so then we went out, and the rest is history.
So how did you meet him before you asked him to the dance?
Well, our junior class got together and started thinking of ways that we could get the boys and the girls somehow knowing each other because we were separated. And so they did a PPD, which was procuring prom dates, because you had the junior and senior prom. And then they would have little dances, or we'd have, what do you call it? We did do volleyball. We played volleyball. We would have different kinds of just activities that we would get together and get to meet each other. And that's where I remember meeting him in the gym playing volleyball. And I just thought, he's really nice. And he looked just like a big huggable person. Like my brothers are very narrow and small. And he was just like this, because I didn't know then that he played football. But yeah, So that's how we met. And
And you asked him to the Sadie Hawkins dance. Can you
mhm.
explain just briefly for anyone who might not know what Sadie Hawkins dance is?
Well, when I was growing up, that girls did not ask boys to dances, and so except for once a year. And a lot of people, I know the other high schools always called them the Sadie Hawkins dance. Our class just called it what it was, backwards, because we were backwards. The girls were asking the boys because it was the boys' responsibility, or I don't know what you call it. Sometimes I think it could be fearful to go and ask somebody else to go out. But it seemed to be the boys' responsibility to ask girls out. And I had only been asked out twice before, and by the same person. And so I wanted to ask this guy because the more I watched him, the more I realized he was really a good guy.
So how did it make you feel when he said no?
I felt disappointed. I felt like, oh, okay, be that way. He was going to be out of town. It wasn't just no, he said he was going to be out of town. And years later, his aunt did verify that. So he was in San Diego at the time. Um, so it just made me say, okay, well, I'll just wait, you know. And so I did.
So that's why you decided to ask him again.
Yes. And one of my best friends was also going out with one of his best friends. And several of us got together and we knew that we would go ahead and fix dinner and all be were 4 or 5 couples that all came at this one person's house, and we prepared the meal and then served it, and then we went to the dance. And that was really, it was a lot of fun being all together and not having a lot of pressure of being just by yourself. So that was nice.
So then you guys went to the prom together also, right?
Yes, it took him a while before he ever got around to asking me, but he finally did. And we also had a wonderful time then. And we went, I think, with 2 other couples at that time too. Sometimes we wouldn't all be at the same in the same car, but we would try to get there, and we ate dinner together, and then we would arrive at the dance together, even though in different cars. And that was nice. And my mom made me a special dress, so that was nice.
So did you think about asking him to prom as well? Or
No. No. Nope, that was all in the men's hands. That was not something that, and I never was that person to be the rebel or to be the one that was going to, you know, make the things change things. I knew some girls that might, but I was not one of them. And I just thought, I thought either the Lord was going to have him ask me or not. And either way, I was going to be okay with it because it wasn't, I do believe that the Spirit does work. And so I had to put that in perspective for myself.
do you remember if any of your girlfriends wanted to ask any of the boys to prom?
Um, I don't know. I think they already had their arrangements, and I don't know who asked whom. I would think that the boys had done it, but sometimes it's if they'd already gone out, that could be understood or something. But yeah, I think that there would be people that would want to ask, but just didn't feel like they could. I mean, I didn't know anybody in particular, but I just, because there were times when I think, oh, I wish I could ask somebody to do this, not even just to go to the movies or, just to go and do something, because if you sit around and wait, that's not always, you don't always get asked and you don't have any control.
So it was the same for dates and things like that then.
Absolutely, absolutely. Sometimes people would just say, okay, we're going, like 3 or 4 of us are all going to go to Norms. And okay, everybody go to Norms and we'll just meet. So you could do like a group get together kind of thing. But for a date, it was definitely for the men. or the boys to ask.
Did you know of any girls that ever did ask a guy to go out with them?
No, I don't know. I do remember my dad even telling my brothers that they had to dance at least twice, because even asking to dance, that was something you waited on. If you didn't get asked, then you didn't dance. Now there were, because we went to, sometimes the girls would dance together, but not all the time or not a lot. But you would still have, so my dad was very mindful of that. And he said, if you're going to go to a dance, you have to dance. You have to ask at least 2 different people to dance, because he knew the responsibility of the boys, because the girls are all waiting and the boys have the control.
How did you feel about that? Like all of those different things. I know you mentioned that you kind of sometimes you wish you could ask, but is that something that you felt often?
Um, I probably didn't feel it often. I just thought it was silly most of the time, but it's just the way it was. And see, and like I said, I wasn't that rebel saying, I'm not going to put up with that. I just went ahead, and that's just the way it is. And it was, you know, we just had to find our own fun if we couldn't. And that's what girls did a lot. We went and did different things and had fun, because not sitting around waiting.
So you graduated high school in 1969.
Yeah.
And then you started college that same year, right?
Yes. Yes. At Long Beach State University.
And what were you majoring in?
I still was believing that I could do languages. So I was taking Spanish again, and I was taking German. So I was still thinking I was going to be an international interpreter.
Did you live in a dorm?
Oh no, lived at home. We were commuter college students, um, both my husband and myself, even though we weren't married at that time.
So you were taking mostly language classes then when you first
Well,
started.
just 2, and then you just do the core curriculum, so that you, in order to get your degree, you had to take a certain amount of classes that would meet, like psychology 101, astronomy, um, just, basic English, literature, things that you had to take in order to get any kind of BA.
Were your professors mainly male or female? Or was there a mix?
There was a mix. There was a mix. The language teachers usually were female. And astronomy and psychology, they were male. Um, After that, I don't remember that much. I only went 1 year there. And
So while you were there, what did you notice about like the makeup of the students? Were there a lot of women or men? Or again, was it a mix up?
it was a mix. It was a mix. I didn't notice more women or more men for myself. I just didn't. Most of the people that I graduated from high school, most of them all went on to college. I would say 80% from our high school, which, because it was basically a college prep high school. So I just didn't, I mean, it just went in to the same thing as in college, was the same kind of mix.
So you got married to your husband in 1970. And so that's while you were both in college still.
Yes, yeah, yeah, my high school sweetheart. And he would pick me up to go to school sometimes, or I'd get a ride from my dad. I did not have a car. Um, that was something that my mom and dad would give after you've gone to college for a year. And except for the ones that didn't go to college, and they got it a year later just because. But so he would pick me up and stuff, and we were both working. I was still working. I got a job at waitressing at the WT Grant, like I said, and so I was working there, and he would come and see me at lunch, when we weren't at school, that he would come and see me at the lunch counter, because that's where I was waitressing. And then I would go see him at night because he worked the night shift at his hamburger stand. And so that's why we would see each other a lot.
So did you always want to get married? I know you mentioned that you wanted to be a nun for a few years, but like before and after that, is marriage something that you kind of always thought would happen for you?
No, I didn't. I until one of my one of the moderator or the sponsor for our social action group, which I was the president, she sat down with me and she told me about being a nun because I told her that I was interested. And she told me, she said, you have to have a calling. She says, you can't just be a nun because you want to do good things. Because I told her that that's why I wanted to be a nun, because it just gives you that whole venue of doing good things. I mean, that's what your whole purpose is. And she says that doesn't cut it. She says that's not good enough. She says you really have to have a calling because the obedience is something that's hard to swallow if you're not called to it. And after she said that, that's when I started thinking, and I was going out with Mike. I thought, well, I would love to be married to him, but I hadn't thought about it really before then. And then it was pretty much all I thought about because I wanted to wake up with him in the morning more than anything. I just thought he's who I want to wake up with. I know that's a silly thing, but it was just that important.
So did you ever feel any pressure from your parents to get married?
No,
Not just to Papa or your husband, but
no,
to, okay.
not at all. No, in fact, I found out years later because the summer of 70, I was told that one of my friends, who we'd known for all of my growing up years, one of our family friends, she was sick, or she was getting over being sick, and she was kind of depressed because her family had just been moved to Maryland. And so they told me that they would really like me to go out there and be with her. And being the do-gooder that I am, I thought, okay, I'll go out and do that. Well, years later, she told me that she was told that Shannon's coming here because she's getting too close to her boyfriend. They didn't want me to be that close and united with him. And but they didn't pay my way. I bought a one-way ticket out there, and then I had to work a 95-cent an hour job in order to pay my way to come back. So no, they were not, I would say they were less than thrilled with the idea of me getting married at a young age or anything.
Do you know why?
I
Why they
think
feel
they
that
just
way?
thought that I was too young. I think I don't think they thought anything bad about my boyfriend. They just thought that I was too young and maybe gullible or naive or whatever. I don't know. I didn't think that I was those things at the time, but in retrospect, I think sometimes I might have been. But anyway, so I think they just didn't like the idea of it being that we were together almost all the time. If we weren't working or going to school, we were together.
So how long have you two been married now?
Right now, it's 53 years. It's only a few months before it'll be 54. Yep. So it's been a long time.
So how is the decision making split up between you and your husband?
As far as what?
Like for big purchases or just kind of bigger life decisions?
Well, he would say, we're a team, but every team needs a coach. So he would put it in his mind, or that, that he would make a suggestion, and I'd usually go with it because I did admire his thought processes. He thinks better and more deeply than I do. And so I respected that part of him. When it came down to some difficult decisions that I would be able to take over and say, I think this is what we really need to do, then he was amenable. I mean, he didn't say, well, that's not my decision. He was okay with that. Because we had some difficult decisions, but that, and I tend to believe that there's a lot of right ways to do the same thing, a lot of right but different ways. He pretty much thought that it was his way was the best way. And that was, and you just think, okay, most of it doesn't need to be hassled. That's, if I really felt strongly about something, he would listen. But most of the time I would think, it's two good ways to do the same thing. So we might as well just do his way. And he was the one, we definitely believed in traditional roles, is that he wanted to be the breadwinner. And I wanted to be the one that would be nurturing in the home and create a home life he wanted to come to, that kind of thing, because it's really, really difficult for people to do both well. Does that make sense? And I didn't have that kind of energy level. I'm not superwoman. And so that was something that, and we had our first child at 70 in 71. So within the first year of our marriage. And we were just tickled to have her. It was just wonderful. And he wanted me to be able to be there. And I believed that no one else could raise my child as well as we could. And therefore, that's where my job was, to be the most important job I could do, was to be at home.
So you found out that you were pregnant in 1970?
No, 16, yeah, 70. Yes, and had her in 71.
And so pregnancy tests, I read that they weren't like widely available at that time. So
They weren't or were?
they were not.
No, I went to the college, to the infirmary at the college. And that's where I had it established that, yes, I was pregnant.
Okay.
And so, and then I went and I found our gynecologist.
Was that a male or a woman?
Male. Yes.
So you were excited about being pregnant?
Yes. Yes. And so was Mike. Very excited. It wasn't the best timing because it was before we were actually married, but nobody else knew it until very late into the pregnancy. And that was because we didn't want anybody to rain on our parade. We were excited and we didn't want, and at that time, it would bring shame on the families, that we would have, I mean, she wasn't going to be out of wedlock, but to be pregnant before we got married, or feel like you have to get married. And we neither felt that we had to get married because we wanted to be. And I think I've mentioned, is that we took our vows of permanence, of commitment, of covenantal vows prior to our wedding. So that was okay for us. And neither one of us have ever broken those vows, and never even wanted to. And so that was important. But when push came to shove about deciding where we were going to have her, I decided that was one of the big decisions at first, is that we needed to stay in Long Beach, close to our folks, whether they liked it or not, or were unhappy with it or not, that we would have her, and to be around family was important. And for him to have his job and me be able to do what I needed to do in a comfortable situation rather than doing everything new. And that's what we did.
So what was the reaction that you got from both of your families when you did tell them that you were pregnant?
Because it was so much later, it was like 3 months after we were married that we told them, they thought, oh, well, okay. and then they started doing the math and they go, well, how far along are you? And then they realized, and they said, well, we knew something was going on. Um, and I think that Mike's parents were disappointed because they really thought that would put a crunch on him continuing at school, because he was the first one in his family to go to college. And so that was, it seemed to be more important than that we were having a grandchild. And but my folks, my mom just said, oh, I knew something. She goes, now we have this and we have this and we have this and we have this. So I was just in the line of everybody being a disappointment. So I got over it real fast because then it didn't seem to matter after that. It wasn't like they held on or they wanted to disown us or anything like that, because we weren't asking anything of anybody. Now, we didn't have a lot of money, that's for sure. And his folks would have us over for dinner at least once a week, because they'd say, we want you to get some protein. The baby needs as much as you can get. They were afraid of the baby not getting enough, because I was eating a lot of beans and hot dogs, because that's what we could afford. So that was sweet of them.
When you found out you were pregnant, did you and your husband decided together that you were going to stop school?
No, yeah, well, I mean, yes, we did. We decided that he would go on there, and I would just take the time. I would take some time off. And I did continue to work until I couldn't be on my feet that much. But we both decided, all those kinds of decisions, we pretty much decide together. He was never dictating to me. He he taught me to be more independent than I was ever taught before. In fact, sometimes I accused him of creating a monster that he may not always be happy with, because when I started realizing that I had a way to stand on my own and I could speak my opinion, then that we had more arguments. I said, well, you created this monster. You got to live with me.
So you went back to school in 1973 for nursing, right?
Yes, that's when I believe that's when I finished. Yes. Yeah, that's when I went back. And I got my nursing degree. So I went back to the community college, which in California, Long Beach Community College was one of the top nursing, 2-year nursing schools in the country. And so I had already gotten most of my prerequisites as far as getting an AS degree done. And then I went into the RN program. I didn't finish the RN program because we had our second child by that time. And he was only saying mama at the age of 2. And so I spun out of it in order to do more clinical hours and get my LVN at the time, which would be a licensed vocational nurse, or at other states, it's called licensed practical nurse, both of them being about the same thing, to support the RNs and what they do. And so I finished that, and that was a good thing, because the reason I did that is because I knew that my husband was going to make enough money for us to live. He was going to be the breadwinner. But if something happened to him, what was I going to do? I had to be in something that was lucrative enough that I could make a living as a single mom. That's the way I looked at it. And so, yeah.
Is that why you chose nursing, or was it a different reason?
Well, I like to serve. I don't mind nursing. I'm not a big one on the science. That was a hard part for me. Teaching is probably something that I found that I really liked about nursing, is I much preferred doing the pre-op or post-op teaching to the patients than I did in doing the care just because I like teaching. And that's something that I have found since then that I enjoy.
Were there any other, were there any male students in your nursing class?
No, no. I think it was with Brian. I think when my pregnancy with Brian, he was born in 74. That was the first time I'd seen a male student nurse, because he came in to check me and he said, "Do you want this male nurse to come and check you?" And I thought, how else is he going to learn? So I thought, okay, yes, you can, because if he's going to be a nurse, he's got to do it and he has to be comfortable with it. And that's something that I can also feel comfortable with, is that if it's for the reason of education, that's fine. And yeah, so there weren't any in my class, either in the RN1 or in the LVN, neither one of those classes.
So how did you feel when you graduated with your LVN degree?
Well, I felt very proud. I felt very proud. Had my cute little nurse's cap, my little outfit. But then I knew that I wasn't going to work full time. So I did start working part-time. And that was helpful. And in 74, my husband got a job at Goodyear that had benefits. We had both of our other children without benefits, without insurance. So everything was paid for by us out of pocket. And so now he had benefits. And so we were trying to buy a house. And so that's what we were able to get a house. And that was when Mike's mom and dad, they offered us the down payment so that we could get the financing for it. It was like $33,000 for that house. And when we went into it, you open up the windows and everything, and you start looking at stuff, and there was no water, and there was electricity had been turned on after we bought it. We had the electricity turned on. There was one outlet in the whole house that worked. All the rest of the electrical wiring had been stripped from the house while it was empty. I learned to cook on an electric skillet for quite a while because we still didn't have any money. we didn't have any money. And but it is the same year that I won on The Price is Right. And that was very helpful. And so we did get a dishwasher, and but anyway, it was just that took us into to East Long Beach, and we just had a house, more house than I ever thought we would ever have. I mean, we hoped, but I didn't ever think that we would.
So speaking of like money, who was generally like in control of the finances between you and your husband?
I did all the check writing and somewhat balancing of the book, but because he was earning it and we would just deposit. And any time that I would earn money, because then I did start working like one night in a week, because then, or maybe 2 nights at a memorial, I would work the graveyard shift. And so that my husband would be back home, then he would take off when I came home. And then I would take care of the kids. One would go to school and the other one would go to a play park area for a Mother's Day Out kind of thing that all mothers ran. It was a cooperative. And then I would just sleep in the car, and they would knock on the door or the window and wake me up when it was time for him to go home. So I was young and I could do with 3 hours of sleep, and that was it for the day. And that money would just go into our bank. I mean, nobody had their money. My mother asked me, she said, you should be having your own money. Because when she started working, that was her money. And she thought that I should have my money. And I said, well, I'm glad that Mike doesn't feel that way, because then we would have no money between us. I said, and his is paying for everything. Mine helps to subsidize. I said, but we did all the finances together. We didn't ever have separate checking. We only had one checkbook. We had only one savings account. I would even do the envelope thing where we would get the cash out for groceries and this and this. And that's the way we did it. I made a lot of gifts when we were young because that was what we could afford. Yeah, we both did it.
You said that your mom, when she got her job, that money was her money.
Yes.
Did she have her own bank account?
No, I don't think so. I don't think she even did. I think she just cashed it and held on to it when she would work her job, because she played bingo 3 times a week. And that's what it went to. And she would just have her wallet. I don't think she ever decided to put it in a bank account.
Have you ever had your own bank account, or has it always been joint?
It's always been joint. And I never had a bank account before we got married, because I never made that much money. So no, I've never had. My husband and I don't even have separate email accounts right now. we share the same email account. We still have everything that we have is in both of our names. Always.
So moving on to when you and your husband and you had 2 or 3 kids when you moved to Oklahoma.
We had 3.
Okay. And what year was that?
1978. We moved to Oklahoma when Sean was about 6 months old. And it was, he was going to be working at the Goodyear plant. Before then, he had been on a year's layoff, but he had been working for Marriott Corporation at the, I can't remember the name of the place. There was an ice cream parlor, Farrell's Ice Cream Parlor. And so he was managing those, and they were making up, Goodyear was making up his money because he was making less than what they laid him off at, because they had closed the plant in the Watts area. And so when they asked him to move, then he also got an invite it was within the same week. They invited him to come to Oklahoma, Lawton, Oklahoma, to work at the new Goodyear plant and to train the new managers that were going to be coming in. And but he also got an invitation to work at the Farrell's at the Galleria in Houston. And I said, that was one of those decisions. He goes, I don't know what to do. And we talk about it, all the possibilities. And I finally said, it's getting so hard because it's so crowded in California that we thought about wanting to go someplace else, but Houston sounds crowded too. I said, why don't we just go to Lawton and see how that is? And so that's what we did. We decided to go to Lawton. And so we did have the 3 kids, and that was, it was good. That was a good move.
Were you working in California when you guys decided to move?
Just the once a week at the hospital. Yeah, I hadn't. Well, and I stopped working after we had the 3rd one because Sean was a baby. I remember working though when I would take care of somebody that had thrown up or whatever at the hospital. I'd go and clean up them and their bed and take care of it. And then I'd go and I'd throw up because I had morning sickness. And then I'd go back and take care of them. It was just, you just didn't even think about it. You just did it. But no, I wasn't working. We were there. I think I did start working. I did do babysitting again because we met these 2 doctors and they had a child that was the same age as Brian. And so I was taking care of the 2 of them. And I was taking it right at our house. We just lived like about 5 houses away. And we still keep in contact with that family even now. This, from 78, I said, so that's a long time ago. And so that way we got some extra money. And then when they got old enough to go into to a preschool program, then my babysitting took care of the cost for Brian to go to preschool. And that was a nice thing. We enjoyed that. And then taking the kids to their swimming lessons at Goodyear. Every summer, they would go and do swimming lessons, and then we would come back after being out at the pool for till lunch, and then we'd go and have some lunch, and then we'd put on a movie or a film or play a game, and then we just all take a rest because Oklahoma was very hot. And the first year that we moved there was very, very cold. The winter of 78 into 79 was extremely cold. And I got cabin fever very, very badly. And it seemed like every time I got on the road, I ended up in a ditch. And my sister came out and she said, "When are you and Mike getting a divorce?" I said, "I don't think we are." So why do you say? And she goes, "The tension in here is enough to cut with a knife." So it was a lot of cultural changes when we moved to Oklahoma. Besides the weather changes and the environmental changes, when you told somebody you were from California, they said, "Oh, the land of the fruits and nuts." They very skeptical about who you were. And then the other thing is that they were always asking you, "Do you have a church?" I thought, what business is it of yours? But I found out that that's what you ask. Everybody asked that of everybody. It wasn't special for us. It was everybody asks if you have a church. And then once you say you're Catholic, then they quiet down. It's like, oh, one of those. I mean, that was really interesting. That was when I had to also figure out whether I was going to be a closet Catholic or come out of the closet and say, yes, I am a Catholic. Because being in the Bible Belt, Catholics were not appreciated. If you want to think about discrimination, they're not appreciated.
So then you went back to school when you guys were in Oklahoma, right?
Yes, yes.
What year was
That was in, about closer to 80, 86, 87, because I went to be, I decided that I wanted to be an early childhood educator. But really, I needed to know what all my units that I had. I mean, I even had auto mechanics on my transcript. I took a lot of classes, and before that time, and probably about 60 units, and way more than what you need to get an AS degree. But anyway, so I went there and I said, what do I qualify? What can I get the fastest degree in? I don't know what my hurry was, but I wanted to get, I figured teaching. And they said, well, you'd do better if you went to home economics because this qualifies you and you only have this many units to take. I said, okay, but I really don't like home economics. And they said, yes, but your early childhood classes, your health classes, your passages, so many of the child development classes, all that stuff for nursing and for other things, they all qualified under home economics. And that's when I found out that early childhood was still under home economics instead of under education and psychology. So I said, yes, I'll do that. They said, we have a scholarship you can apply for. So I did. I was awarded that. And so for 2 years, I took classes and went back to school and got my degree in 89, I think it was. And yeah, 89. And so then I had my early childhood degree from Cameron University. And I was offered 2 or 3 jobs right out of school. And because I was even giving presentations even then on early childhood and how to classroom manage and stuff. And then my husband was transferred. So he did this a lot to me. And we went to, then that's when we moved to Kentucky.
What year was that?
That was in, I think, 89 or 90,
Why did you make that move?
because my husband got transferred again. And yeah, Oklahoma wasn't closing down, but he wasn't moving anywhere either. And so it was needed that this was going to be his chance to move up. And so we moved to Madisonville, Kentucky. And
Did you have a job in Oklahoma when you guys made that move to Kentucky?
well, I was going to be having a job in teaching at one of the kindergartens, but had to tell them, no, I can't do that. And so then we had, we were in Madisonville, Kentucky, and that's the place where you have to know somebody to get a job. And I didn't know anybody. And so I started out being not even a teacher's aide, it was just an aide, which we did hearing and vision screening, I think, for all the kids from third grade below in all of the schools in that region. And I hated it because I'd go into classrooms and I think I could be so much better than these teachers. And almost all elementary school teachers then too were all female. And the principals were often male.
Did you
And
ever see any like administration or principals that were women?
yes, the the school that Joanne was going to, that was a female early, elementary school principal was female. And the school that we left, one of our first, I forgot to tell you that there was a principal, Mrs. Gaines, was in Oklahoma. Yes, in Oklahoma before we moved to the Eisenhower house. But she was a Black woman that was a principal. That was very unusual, but she was there. And even before I left, I had another female principal that was going to hire me and wanted me. She would have people come in when I was doing my student teaching. She would have groups of people, 3 and 4 people, come into the back of my classroom just to watch. Because she goes, if you want to watch a whole language teacher, this is the one you want to watch. So Mrs. Reno was female also. So there were more female principals at that time than when my kids were really than when I was young. But anyway, I didn't have a job other than the aide. And then after I gave all these presentations all over the place, then finally somebody said, well, we want to come and see your classroom. I said, I can't get a job. I just admitted to the ladies. And they said, well, then we need to have our principal come up and meet you. And so they did, and he came over, and this was 45 minutes away from where I lived. And after school started, I didn't hear anything, so I was still just going to be an aide. And then I got a call, and they hired me in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. And so I drove 45 minutes every day to work on the highway and back. And what they did is they took 4 classes, 2 second grade and 2 third grade classes. And the teachers were told, whoever you don't want, we'll put in this class. And so that's who I got. And so I had 22 students, and 20 were all on free lunch. And I had, I think, 3 or 4 that tested higher than the 70th percentile. They were, but they just needed some good teaching. I'm convinced. But anyway, so that was my first year there. And I did make intern of the year there. And I worked really hard, and it was very, very hard. That time, our oldest daughter came back to live with us because she had gotten herself some in debt. And so she was with us. And so I would spend a lot of time going to and from work and at work because it took a lot to do a whole language curriculum, because that's all making it up on my own instead of just doing what teacher manuals tell me to do. And so that was a lot of work. And it was very hard on myself and on my husband's and my relationship and on the kids.
So you had 2 kids at home during that time, or 3?
Yeah, we had, let's see, this is in Maryland.
Kentucky?
Oh, in Kentucky. We had 4 kids at home. Because I forgot when.
In 1991?
91. Brian was going to Georgia Tech at that time. So our second oldest was going to Georgia Tech. So we had 3 at home.
Okay.
Yes.
So for the younger ones, who was watching them while you were working?
Well, Joanne was in school. And so Michelle was able to take care of her and be there when she was coming home. Or Sean would be, and Sean was older. Sean was 4 years older than her. So he was in 7th grade. So the 2 of them could be. And so she was going to school and working. And boy, those years.
And then
Yeah.
you moved again to Maryland, right?
Maryland. Yes.
And what
Yes.
year was that?
That was in 93.
And how did you?
Maybe it was 90, was it 92? 93. I think it was 93 that we moved to
How did you feel
Kentucky.
about moving again?
Well, and it was again in the fall. So I already had this time the principal, he was male, of the school that I was teaching at, wanted his son to be in my classroom. So he gave me an all 3rd grade class. And several of the ones that were in 2nd grade the year before that were in my class also requested to be in my class. And so they had me for 1 quarter, and then we were moved again. So I was very disappointed because here I was going again to where I didn't know anybody, and you kind of have to know somebody to get a job. And so anyway, that's when we went. And but they did happen to have an opening at Head Start for an education coordinator, not for a teacher, a preschool teacher, but for the coordinator. And I thought, no, I don't think so, but I can try. So I went and I spoke to them. They hired me. They said it's part-time because it's the first time they had this position to oversee the 5 different rural areas, so that the teacher would go into the rural area and teach the parents. Well, they were supposed to teach the parents, but actually they just played with the kids for 2 or 3 hours and then come back. And what I taught them to do is that what they were supposed to do is to teach the parents how to teach the children. So these were at risk level economically and a lot of times socially. And so they had a lot of things that they had to undergo with me because I had expectations. And I said, your tax money, my tax money is paying our salaries. We need to make sure that we make it work and do the best we can do. So I was I hated at first, but by the time we left in 96, or by the time I had to leave to go to another job, they were very, very sorry to see me go, because my people that they respected me because I respected them. I just needed them to do the job that they were supposed to do. And I also that was a nice experience. But I just did things like read the memos that came by my desk. I don't know if I had mentioned that we went on after a full year, then we went on a retreat for business planning. And we had that arbiter come, and I didn't know why we'd have an arbiter. I thought, I don't know, maybe they always have one, but they didn't. They had it because of me. And so I didn't know that until afterwards, is that they said that I just spoke up and I said things and I challenged people, and they weren't used to that kind of person. They didn't think that I would be, I don't know. I don't have any idea what their clue was, because I never had any designs on anybody's job. Just, I always wanted to work with everybody to make everything go well. But I did believe in us having, a vision of what we wanted our teachers to be doing. So they had to learn it, and they had never heard of that before. So I don't know. But anyway, so that was Head Start. And then I was able to get a job at as a readiness coordinator. So during that time we were there, I think that was in the fall of '94. I put together a at-risk and disability preschool program that was a special funding, and a special ed teacher was working with me with these young children. And we had kids that had never used a napkin before. We had kids that didn't know about washing their face or hands. They were just at risk. They were just the special eds, these little animals. But all they needed was, to be taught and find out how important it is. So I did that job in the morning. And then in the afternoon, I did the readiness coordinator job, and which meant that I worked with early childhood educators and probably 60 different facilities of some kind, whether it was nutrition, doctor's offices, what do you call them? Clinics, hospitals, anybody that worked with any kind of young children, because it was for that no child should be left behind, and that all children come to school ready. And how many dimensions of a child's life all have to be in conjunction in a readiness for a child to do well at school. We also have to have the appropriate curriculums too. And but anyway, so that's what I did, and that took all year long to plan that. And that was with Mr. McFeely, was our Grand Marshal. And we had over 500 children and families come in and participate. It was done throughout the whole mall. All the businesses were closed. They just did this for the mall. And so that's what I did. So those were the things that I did. And then the funding dried up. And then I had another male principal hire me, because I had already interviewed with him before, and he didn't take me. And I thought, but it was because the other woman wanted me for the other program. So anyway, so then I had Mr. Llewellyn, and he hired me, and he was very excited to have me. And you had 2 kindergarten classes, one morning and one afternoon. And I worked with several children and did all of that. And I was ready. I had just gotten through the whole year and was ready to start the next year, except for the fact that in April, late April, my husband says, we're moving again. And this time it was to Texas. Oh, and by the way, I've taken a Oklahoma teaching certification test, a Kentucky certification test, Maryland had the NEP, which is the national educational test. But I came to Texas, had to take another board. Anyway, so we moved because of his job, and moved to Tyler, Texas in 96, June of 96. He wasn't even here for the move. We had to put Sean in charge of it. It's taken me a long time to figure out that I could say no. I could have said, we're going to wait for 2 weeks and then do it. But he had already been without us for over 5 weeks.
So he moved first to
Yes,
Texas.
he was already doing the job before the rest of us were coming. Yes, they called him when he was out on business for another job. I mean, for Goodyear, but he was on another location, and the people called him even there and told him that we need you to transfer and come and be with us.
And so you and Sean and Joanne went 5 weeks after?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we did.
And why was Sean in charge of the moving?
Because I was still at school. He was out because it was his graduation year. So his dad came home for the graduation, but then left. And so Joanne and I were still in school. We had another week or two to go. And so Sean was, because he wanted us to be there as soon as we could. And so we put him in charge, which is ridiculous now that I think about it, for anybody for a high school kid to have to supervise a 4-bedroom house move. That's crazy pants. But anyway, we did it and it all worked out. In fact, we found a trombone that was missing before, showed up in Tyler. And so we moved here in 76.
96.
I mean 96, sorry.
Okay.
And
so when you got to Tyler, what did you do?
Well, my husband, being the nice guy he is, he says, well, you don't have to get a job for a while. I said, okay. That's still a little ticked, that having to move and knowing that I don't know anybody again. And then comes August, he said, well, it's time to get a job. I go, what? There's no way I'm going to get a job in a school because it's too late. So I hired on as the curriculum coordinator for a kindergarten down through, I think they were 3-year-olds program. And so I was going to be the curriculum coordinator. But I thought, you told me I didn't need one. And he goes, well, it was 2 months. You got everything unpacked and done. Anyway, obviously he still didn't have a grasp of educational problems. Anyway, so I did work at Kids Kaleidoscope. The next year I hired on as the kindergarten teacher. And so I was in Yuppie Land, teaching kindergartners of very privileged people. But they still needed help in learning how to know how to work with their children. And I was a favored teacher. People really liked me. I won Kindergarten Teacher of the Year from the NAEYC one year. I just did that program for quite a while. And as I was looking at, we were getting older, and our kids were pretty much ready to move and be out, because Sean had gone off to college by that time. Joanne was in high school when I was teaching there, because when she moved here, she was, she was going to be in high school. And she decided she wanted to go, we offered to go to Catholic school, and she decided to go to the public school. And so anyway, I taught at Kids Kaleidoscope, but we were looking at retirement sometime. And I thought, what do I want to do when we're getting to be retired? And I thought, And somebody else had been through a program called the Chaplaincy program, which is learning to become a hospital chaplain. They said it was very difficult, but I could apply and see. So I thought about it for like 3 years before I ever applied. I applied, and then I was accepted. I was accepted in 2006 for the 2007 program. So, and they worked it on like a school year. So it started in September. And so, so I worked until the June of 2007 at Kids Kaleidoscope. And then we took a tour of Ireland, I think. And during this time, we've had a couple foreign exchange students live with us. I don't know, it doesn't matter, but we did, because we weren't able to travel very much. So we had somebody come and live with us when we were in California from San Salvador. And then when we were in Maryland, we had somebody come from Kazakhstan. And we just liked opening up our doors and letting our kids see different people and different cultures. And I thought I'd like to be a chaplain. So I retired from Kids Kaleidoscope in 2007. And then there was a lot of going on with the plant that was in Tyler that my husband worked. And sure if they were going to close it. They said, well, even if close, he's to stay and put to bed, and so he'll be here for the next year. I said, okay, are you sure? Yes, we're sure. Okay. And so anyway, he ended up, I started the program. It was the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. We were put on the floor after 2 weeks of orientation and became chaplains, working chaplains. Everybody was told and suggested to have a counselor, your own therapist, to help you deal with what you were dealing with. And I definitely went ahead and did that, because I think everybody should have a therapist, just in general. And then and our youngest daughter got married that year. And so, so anyway, we had, I think it was in December that my husband got a call saying we were going to be transferred to Fayetteville, North Carolina. I said, but I've got this program. And he said, I know, he said, but this is something that they need. And I thought, I really struggled with it. And I said, is it okay if I finish the second unit? And I said, because that puts them in a bind. Everybody else would have to work so much longer hours, because once a week you basically were working overnight. So you'd put in 36 hours at one time. That was probably the toughest part of it. But I thought, I need to go and be with him. And so I said I would just do the second unit. Usually you get 4 units, and the first is from September to December. The next one is January to March. And so I was going to finish until March. And so I did. And, but that was an amazing time. And every time I worked overnight, I never slept. I might have gotten an hour's sleep, but I had as many as 7 deaths in one night that I would have to go and be with the families through all of that and do the recording and be with people. Sometimes they would just call me and just say, he needs to talk to somebody, she needs to talk to somebody. And I would go up and figure out. Sometimes there would be things in the middle of the day, people going crazy because they were just so grief-stricken that they would say, we need people to come up. We've got 30 people and they're coming out in the hallways and we don't know what to do. And we would go to those things and not knowing what to do. But I had a very good gift for whatever it was, that to read people and to accommodate what they needed. And so I was good at it, and I hated giving it up. But I also knew that even though I could work with two credits, I could go and be a chaplain somewhere without the 4. I also needed the kind of support that other chaplains were giving each other, because we did a lot of support meetings all the time. Because I looked into it of becoming a chaplain when we went to Fayetteville, North Carolina. And I thought, I can't do it without the support. I knew that. And then my mother was sick. She had been sick during this time, and she was given a terminal diagnosis in March. And I got a call from my dad in April. And I said, well, I already bought my tickets to come and see my mom in May 1st. And he said, well, you can't, but let me check with mom. So he went and checked, and she said, you're okay. She just didn't want anybody else coming and visiting because she was just not feeling well. And so when I went to see her, she goes, you should have been here 2 or 3 weeks ago. She goes, I don't want you going back. And so then I took care of my mom. I was her caregiver until she passed November of that year. So even though I was in the chaplaincy program and I went to be with my husband, he knew that I needed to be with my mom. So I took care of her until till November 19th. And then I stayed until Thanksgiving was over. And then I went back home. And then I went back to Fayetteville, North Carolina for the next year. And I didn't get a job. I didn't get a job. That I was on retirement, and I just had fun. It was best retirement year because he was always busy. I was going to daily mass. I was going to tennis. I was going to water aerobics. I was in a poetry writing group. I was doing all kinds of wonderful things, and doing artwork and making prayer cloths and stuff like that. So it was wonderful. And when he decided to retire, he said, we're leaving that next week. And I said, no, we're not. I finally said, no, we're going to give ourselves a little bit of time. And we did. And then we moved back to, back to Tyler, Texas. We had kept the house and let our children stay in it while we were gone. And then Sean was off doing his starting med school, and Joanne had gotten married. So then we just came in and they found another place. And so, but that's where we did.
So how did you feel when you had said no?
Oh,
that you had
yeah.
to, how did
Yeah.
you?
I thought, darn it, we're going to do it my way this time. And it just took so long because I have regretted that I could have done it differently the other times, but it's a real pull. There is an inner struggle between wanting to do what you want to do and then what you think is best for your marriage. Does that make sense? So anyway, so when we came back to Tyler, Texas, I took things a lot easier. I ended up volunteering at the Hospice of East Texas because my mom was taken care of by a hospice. And then I worked with them for a while. And when I realized that the people weren't always all there, that I was walking with on this last part of their journey, that, they were in the hospital bed and they were worried about the chair, that how is my husband going to get that home tonight? They knew their husband wasn't going to take it home tonight. You knew that they weren't going home tonight. So that's when I started looking at dementia and taking classes online for dementia. And then within about 2 years, I became a dementia specialist. I had enough certification for dementia specialist. Then Hospice of East Texas had a grant given to them. And they asked me, would you start a program for all of our people that are in dementia at the end stage? And I said, of course. It was a huge passion of mine. I was very passionate about giving each person the best day that they could have, knowing what they're going through. And I taught over 60, I was there for 3 years as the dementia specialist. I taught over 60 volunteers how to work with dementia patients. I taught all the staff how to work with dementia patients, because our dementia patients could be dying of cancer, but still have early stages of dementia. But we also had those that were dying of dementia because they had Alzheimer's and had gone to that. So we had to have the ability to work with all levels. Then they went ahead and Hospice of East Texas is a nonprofit. And so they also have a very strong community outreach. I was going into so many nursing homes and rehab places, giving staff all kinds of training for working with dementia patients. And so I did that for 3 years. And then I grew the program so it was beyond my part-time job. And the way it needed to be done, that I felt, it needed to have somebody that was willing to give more than 25 hours a week or even 30. And so I resigned, thinking that they were going to get somebody. And they didn't. And it hasn't ever been resurrected, which is a shame. And because everybody's working so behind with the nurses that all quit during COVID, they haven't even had availability of time for me to just donate my time to give classes, because I'll just donate my time to give those presentations and stuff now, because now I still continue to be a volunteer working with dementia patients. And I continue with my little online business with Celebrate Faith. And in fact, I have a order to get out today with a rosary. And I think we have 9 grandchildren though, that keep us very busy and very in touch with who we want to be as family members. And that's a wonderful thing. That's a gift that our children have given us. If they just don't live by us, that's the biggest problem. But we do love them. Anything else I forget?
So we started off the interview with me describing you as an amazing mother and grandmother and a former nurse and educator. And so how would you describe yourself in 3 words?
You mean like 3 different words? I'm very blessed. I try to be optimistic, and I try to be loving. Those are the things that I continue to. So I'm a striving person. I strive to be loving and caring and optimistic.
And we talked about a lot of things today, and looking back on all that you've experienced and you've achieved, what makes you most proud of your younger self?
That's a good question. The desire to learn. I think that I've never been afraid of learning and being open to things. I think that's because only in and through that, I mean, we were 19 when we got married. By the grace of God, truly that we are together, but also because we know that what commitment means and what being open to learning, so that this isn't working, you got to figure something else out. And so I think being open to learning, and of course I do believe that I am blessed. We are all blessed.
So as we close our interview, I wanted to thank you for sharing your story with me and our audience. It was truly a privilege to hear your story, and I'm excited about the impact that it will have for our Witnesses to Her Story project.
Thank you very much. It's been an honor. And
Yeah.
thank you.